Greetings. Today I'm discussing what we should give to people with disabilities. My name is Timothy Roscoe Carter. I spent 2 decades as a Social Security SSI disability attorney. I have a medically severe invisible disability, attention deficit disorder. I first published an article advocating for basic income in 2004, and I'm currently the clinic director at a low-income taxpayer clinic in San Francisco. My thesis today is that payment or services to people with disabilities should address specific individual needs, not disabled status. Why should we give extra money or services to people with disabilities? All of the arguments I've heard for doing this generally fall under one of 3 different categories. The first is to compensate for an inability to earn an income. This is the idea behind most current disability benefit programs, including the 2 that I used to work with, Social Security disability insurance and supplemental security income based on disability. The second reason I've often seen is to compensate for the pain and misfortune of being disabled. This is sometimes referred to as luck egalitarianism. And the third is to relieve the financial burden of specific expenses resulting from a person's disability. Compensating for an inability to earn an income is necessary for disabled people in a society without a basic income. However, forcing people to prove an inability to work is degrading, demoralizing, and a barrier for the exact people who need it. You're forcing disabled people to go in front of a tribunal and explain how dysfunctional they are as a person. And the bureaucracy and the paperwork is especially difficult for people who are depressed or have visual impairments or many other disabilities. The application process takes years. It excludes as many people as who receive disability, and many deserving people give up. And as I explain here in a moment, I believe the difficulties of proving disabled status are inevitable. Here is a table from the SSI Annual Statistical Report from 2019. As of when this table, these statistics were made, there were still, as you can see here, over 4,600 people who had applied for disability, SSI disability in 2012 and had not yet received a decision 7 years later. And as you can see here, from 2011, the last year for which all of the results were in, of the over 2.7 million people who applied, less than half, about 44.5%, were awarded disability. Well, were determined to be disabled. And now you might think that, well, we can just improve the process and so that there can be fewer number of people that we have to argue about. The problem is that in any system where you have to distinguish the disabled from those who are not disabled, you will have a legal framework. There may be many factors, maybe different ways of determining it under the law, but you're going to end up with a range of functionality. And in that range, the largest group of people in that range, the largest area of that range is going to be for people who are obviously not disabled. And you're going to have a long tail within that range of functionality where people are obviously disabled. And you're going to have some area there, though, inevitably, where people are, where it's arguable. A common example is back pain. Clearly, most people have back pain but are not disabled, whereas some people have back pain to the point where they're bedridden most days and are worse off than many blind people or people who are in wheelchairs. Now, it may look like, however, that you can that by getting this arguable area narrow, that you're not going to affect that many people. The problem is that the population is not distributed evenly across the spectrum. The population is distributed more in a bell curve. And so the population actually looks something like this. And as you can see in any bell curve distribution, the group of people who are arguably disabled are almost always going to be equal to or more than the number of people who fall into the long tail of the obviously disabled. Luck egalitarianism creates the same bureaucratic problems of proving disabled status as compensating for a lack of income. Forcing people to prove the worthlessness of their life is degrading and demoralizing. Luck egalitarianism pits disabled people against disabled people. Certainly some people who are extremely disabled might feel that their worth is being degraded if they get the same amount of money as people who are only partially disabled. But then if you try to set it on a scale of paying those who are greater disability more money because they suffer greater from their disability than others, then you're creating a system where everybody goes up to the tribunal to argue that my life is more pathetic than this other disabled person's. And finally, luck egalitarianism, the concept essentializes disabilities that are often socially constructed, so that many barriers, if not most barriers that disabled people experience are a result of how society has constructed itself and in such a ways as to exclude the disabled people. But the luck egalitarianism forces people to talk about how bad their lives are because of the disability, and it makes it and you have to argue that your life is bad because of this disability, making the disability the problem, not society. Compensating for specific expenses, however, such as buying a wheelchair accessible van for people who need to use wheelchairs, it can be done via cash, via in-kind goods and services, or through laws and regulations. Provides providing the cost of specific expenses does not pit disabled people against disabled people. If I need a van because of having to use a wheelchair, that has nothing to do with whether or not you need a seeing eye dog. It's just you're just talking about your needs because of your disability. Having specific needs because of your disability does not imply a general life worthlessness. My life isn't worthless because I have to use a wheelchair. It's just that society has constructed our transportation system as in a way to make it impossible for me to use it effectively without this van. And that's not my fault. That's society, and they're compensating me for that. And finally, I should note that administration of this can be bureaucratic and cumbersome, but it is similar to administering health insurance, which most societies with health insurance do anyway. To go back and summarize my points about the 3 reasons to give extra money or services to people with disability. First, compensating for an inability to earn an income. The problem is that dividing the able-bodied from the disabled is inherently problematic, and it should be replaced with a UBI. Luck egalitarianism is degrading, demoralizing, and divisive, and it should not be considered regardless of a UBI. And relieving the financial burden of specific expenses resulting from disability, that is necessary in addition to a UBI. And again, to summarize these 3 points, payments or services to people with disabilities should address specific individual needs, not disabled status. Thank you. I'm available for questions, and any questions can be sent to tcarter@sfbar.org.